on the Murray River called Thologalong, and this property, as you're no doubt seeing through aerial vision, has been described to me as off the grid, an isolated property. There is disused trucks and cars, shipping container and other material, and Desi Freeman was believed to be in the shipping container. At 5 a.m, as I said this morning, police began negotiating with Desi Freeman. They received a tip-off to this location in the days prior to this morning. They were trying to negotiate his surrender. He declined, and then at 8:30, a bearded, long-haired Desi Freeman has emerged from this shipping container. He was draped in bedding or a blanket of some sort, and then police say he revealed a firearm to them. It's at that point that specialist operators who are at some distance away have opened fire, killed this individual, look, today police have been tight-lipped about who fired first in this incident. The Chief Commissioner has reiterated multiple times after reviewing this footage that he believed that the police's actions at the time were justified, but this has brought to an end one of the most significant manhunts in Australian history. Desi Freeman has been on the run since August last year, since opening fire at a property in Porpunka where he was living on a group of police officers who were there to carry out an arrest warrant over sex offences. 2 police officers died at the scene, a third was seriously injured, and as I said, this is a very dramatic day and brings to an end one of the most significant manhunts in Australian history. Sarah?
Mike, one of the big questions that's been going for months is, were people helping him? So how long was he at this property, do we know? And do we know yet whether he was being helped?
Well, Sarah, we know at least for the last 24 hours, a bit longer, Desi Freeman was at this property, but that is at the centre of this investigation. Police are looking to speak with the property owner who was not there at the scene, nor were there others at the scene. Speaking to this property owner who is away is of utmost importance, and they're also looking to establish how Desi Freeman got here, whether or not he was assisted by anyone to get here, and whether or not anyone was providing him with the essentials. As I said, the coroner has been here all day, forensically analysing it, and that is where the investigation is tonight.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. Keep us posted on what you learn tomorrow. And that's the programme for this evening. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Good night.
Isn't reached soon. Still, Iran and its ally Hezbollah are keeping up the pressure. Israel says this fire at an oil refinery in the north was caused by falling debris after a missile intercept. Regime, quote, more reasonable, and says the U.S. is holding direct negotiations with Tehran.
So we've had very good negotiations today with Iran, getting a lot of the things that they should have given us a long time ago. We'll see how it works out, but they're very good, moving along very nicely. And we are negotiating with them directly and indirectly. We have emissaries, but we also are dealing directly.
But Tehran denies Trump's claim.
We have had no direct negotiations with America so far, since the last round of negotiations until now. The U.S. demands have been very excessive, unrealistic and illogical.
Iran accuses the U.S. of signaling negotiations in public while secretly plotting a ground attack. Iran warns the U.S. will be humiliated if they put boots on the ground and says its forces will invade Gulf Arab countries if U.S. troops set foot on Iranian soil.
And earlier I spoke with Bente Scheller, head of the Middle East and North Africa division at the Heinrich Böll Foundation, which is affiliated with Germany's Green Party. I asked her how serious we should take Donald Trump's threat to target Iran's energy sites.
Well, unfortunately, we have already seen civilian infrastructure being targeted, oil plants, desalination plants. So I think we unfortunately need to take this seriously. And I think for the Iranian people, it is another sign that actually this war is not just against the regime, it is against the state of Iran.
Iran is, meantime, continuing retaliatory strikes in the region, including a key water and electrical plant in Kuwait and an oil refinery in Israel. It's also threatening to launch its own ground invasion of Gulf Arab countries and mine the Persian Gulf if U.S. troops set foot on its territory. How are you seeing the risks of this conflict ratcheting up further?
Well, I think both sides are trying to rhetorically escalate to force negotiations. I think for Iran, it is absolutely clear. If this regime thinks it is doomed to fail, it is willing to do pretty much anything to enhance danger and to enhance destruction, especially in the neighboring countries.
Meantime, we know that Trump wants to get Iran to the negotiating table. That seems quite clear. Pakistan has come out as a serious mediator between the parties. It's not even clear that Iran can be brought to the table. What do you think can be expected from talks?
I think on the one hand, Pakistan is doing this because it is in a security pact with Saudi Arabia. And we have seen Saudi Arabia getting attacked before. So I think this pact would bind Pakistan to join on Saudi Arabia's side to the war. But it is not interested in doing so because of domestic considerations, but also international ones. Therefore, I think Iran has a strong interest in being involved as a mediator in order to avoid being called in for the security pact. I think in the end, everything will depend on whether the US can be brought in. And this is highly doubtful because President Trump thinks he is in the stronger position, whereas I think tables have turned. Iran actually is in the stronger position. And therefore, I think all negotiation efforts currently are running into a void.
In the meantime, Trump is calling Iran's new leaders reasonable. What do we know about them? And who do you see as in a position to negotiate any deal on the Iranian side? And how accommodating do you think they might be to the U.S. position?
Well, that is a really good question, because already on the first day of the war, or pretty much the second, President Trump said we had a plan for who should be taking over politically in Iran, but now they are all dead. And this is a pattern that we see. If we see leaders emerging, especially in the security sector, they happen to be killed quite frequently. And therefore, the question is who in the end can negotiate, who can sign any kind of agreement, and whether this person will be able to really implement it. And therefore, I think we will have to wait. For Trump, it is a kind of flavor of the day, whether he calls somebody rational or amazing or whatever. We can't rely on that. But I think what we can rely on, the Revolutionary Guards are in a very, very strong position now, and it is not all about the successor of Khamenei, his son Mojtaba Khamenei.
And that was Middle East analyst Bente Scheller speaking with me earlier. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says that 80% of Syrians in Germany should return to their homeland within the next 3 years. He made the comments alongside Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Sharaa. It is al-Shara's first trip to Berlin since ousting longtime dictator Bashar al-Assad in 2024. The focus of talks has been reconstruction and the future of the around 1 million Syrians in Germany. Many arrived as refugees around a decade ago during the peak of the migrant crisis in Europe. Al-Shara's visit has also sparked protest over his past as an Islamist leader. The two leaders held a joint press conference after their one-to-one talk.
Over the longer term, within the next 3 years, as President Sharaa has requested, around 80% of Syrians currently residing in Germany should return to their home country.
And for more now, let's bring in Middle East expert Christiane Hanold from the Bertelsmann Foundation. Welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us. As we just heard there, the talks focused primarily on the return of Syrian refugees. Now, according to Chancellor Friedrich Merz, 80% should return. Here's how the numbers currently stack up. We have more than 1.3 million Syrians living in Germany, and around 250,000 have become citizens. Do we know how many would like to return to Syria?
I think there are some surveys, but I don't have the figures in mind. I can only tell you, I studied in Syria. The last time when I was in Syria was in 2010. And all Syrians who came here, who are friends of me and my family, all of them have jobs, crucial jobs that help to secure our society and administration and economy. I think it's wisely to be very sensitive when discussing this issue, because a lot of migrants we really need to keep our society and economy running, and we should not make them fear that they are expelled back to their home countries. This is why it's important to give them the opportunity to visit their families back in Syria, to see how things are, and to enable them, if they want to reinvest in their home country, that all of these facilities are being realized.
What would it mean for the German economy if a large number of skilled workers were to leave?
I can only tell this, from my private surroundings, that then part of businesses or administrations have to be closed. And I think it's very important that we have a very, let me say, fact-based and non-emotional discussion about the migrants and the refugees who came here to our country, and to focus on cooperating with Syrian companies, with Syrian administrations, to see that there is a reconstruction which helps them to, let me say, to give an environment to modernize Syria. It's first of all the Syrian refugees in the neighboring countries, and inside Syria there are already a lot of IDPs. First of all, they need homes and they need jobs. So it's first of all important that the Syrians who are refugees in Lebanon, in Turkey and Iraq and Jordan, a lot of them already returned to Syria. Most of them want to go back to Syria, that there is a political and also economic conditions that enable them to return. And this is why it's very important during this visit of the Syrian interim president, Ashara, talking with our German government, to focus on the political framework, meaning that pluralistic structures, inclusion of all sects, religious and ethnic in the society, that is what's important, so that the violence of the militias of the regime against minorities will really end, and that all parts of the society feel that they are part of the modernization of Syria, because we need all parts of the society. And by the way, we have all parts of the sects and ethnic groups of Syria who fled to Germany are also represented here in Germany. And some of them, I've seen it this morning at the German Foreign Office, Druze, Kurds, and Alawites have been demonstrating for their rights of their families at home back in Syria.
Tell us a little bit more about the visit of al-Shara, meantime, to Germany, because, it has stirred controversy here, given that he previously led an Islamist militant group before assuming Syria's leadership. What's your assessment of what has been going on in the country, including protests on the streets?
I think that interim President Shara has so far missed a chance. In the beginning, I was in the region when there was the ouster of former dictator Assad, and when Ashara and the Islamists came to power, there was a lot of positive mood, a lot of energy, a lot of hope. All of this has changed since he did not really create one army out of all the militias. Maybe the interim president is still dependent on these terrorist or tried Islamist militias. That is a very big obstacle. That is a very big obstacle to rule of law and also to modernization, if he does not change that structure economically and politically in his country.
Thank you so much, and apologies, we have to leave it there. Middle East expert Christian Hanold from the Bertelsmann Foundation. We appreciate your time.
A pleasure. All the best, Sarah.
Now, Israeli lawmakers are set to vote on a controversial bill mandating the death penalty for acts of terrorism. The legislation was introduced by Israel's far-right government as a reaction to the Hamas-led October 7th terror attacks. Israel's European allies say that the expanded death penalty unfairly targets Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, as DW's Emily Gordine reports.
Far-right Israeli lawmakers are about to vote on advancing a death penalty bill that targets Palestinians. Initiators claim it is aimed at terror convicts, while maintaining there is no such thing as a Jewish terrorist. It's now with the parliament plenum for the final 2 votes needed to pass by Otzma Yehudit, the far-right party led by National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir.
Death penalty for terrorists now.
Supporters argue that the bill is a, quote, significant step toward restoring deterrence to the state of Israel.
A dead terrorist will not return to the cycle of terrorism and will not be released alive.
So how will the bill work? The bill setting a precedence refers to 2 geographical areas of jurisdictions, Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. In Israel, the death penalty would be applied to someone convicted in a terrorist act after having intentionally killed another person with the aim of negating the existence of the State of Israel.
This part of the definition of the law is aimed at applying this law to Palestinian terrorists rather than Jewish ones, because in general, when someone
spend your life in prison, well, I'm not sure if it's better than be sentenced to death, but it is officially discriminating between Jews and Arabs.
And those concerns that you are stating right there, those are concerns which have also been expressed by, you know, the foreign ministers of the largest economies. And then on top of those concerns, you also have arguing that the death penalty will deter terrorism. So why do you think this bill is being proposed at all?
I think that timing is very important. I think that this is part of the populism, or if you like, the post-November 23 trauma, that people were exposed to the massacre that is not going away. It will last forever. People keep saying that this is the worst thing that happened to the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And this is the common knowledge in Israel. So they are looking for something that may deter the Palestinians or the enemy to do it again. The other thing is actually to tie the arms of the politicians from another exchange of prisoners, because the argument that comes from the people who initiated this law is that the Palestinian terrorists believe, and they have a good reason because it happened several times, that they will spend a few years in jail until Israel will have to exchange them for Israeli prisoners. Even Israel was willing to exchange terrorists for bodies. So what they believe that if there is the law will tie the arms from future politicians, because Prime Minister Rabin exchanged terrorists for Jewish prisoners, and Netanyahu did it twice. So actually the message is we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our own leaders that they will have the strength to say no to public pressure. And Sarah, I'm sure that you followed the footage from Israel, the demonstrations of the families. I know that they visited Berlin, demonstrating, calling the government, demanding the government to pursue the Palestinian offer or the American offer to exchange the terrorists for Israeli captives.
And that was Haaretz contributor Akiva Elder. Now, in the first weeks of the Ukraine war, the city of Bucha was the scene of some of the worst atrocities by Russian troops. More than 450 civilians brutally killed. At the height of the Russian occupation, one amateur photographer risked his life to document the horrors.
Some of the worst Russian war atrocities took place right here on Voksalna Street in the center of Bucha. Local resident Vasil Molchan took these images. He felt it vital to show what was happening in his town. 4 years later, there are hardly any reminders on this quiet street of the horror of that time.
In the morning, it was still our normal street. And then later during the day, I went outside. And it was like Berlin 1945 or something. At the same time, I had the feeling that it needed to be documented quickly, because many friends said, "Oh no, there's no war there. There's nothing. No Russians." I said, "Look, here are..."
Decided to leave his hideout and secretly film on the street. He even installed a surveillance camera in his attic, an almost fatal mistake as Russian troops spotted the device at his window.
The camera was here, and they shot here. Bang, bang. And over there were broken tables, computers, everything.
The soldiers eventually moved on and Vasil remained unharmed, unlike many of his neighbors. Just a few hundred meters from Vasil's house is the intersection with Jablunska Street. This was one of the hotspots of the massacres. International journalists were able to document that within a very short section, around 40 people were brutally killed by a single Russian unit. Russian troops perpetrated massacres in almost all parts of Bucha during their occupation in February and March 2022. More than 110 bodies were buried in this mass grave alone on the premises of the town's central church.
When we meet, we still talk about those events a lot, about everything that happened here. But also, we don't have much time to simply sit on a bench and reflect. We're still living in a state of war, with Russian bombings continuing day and night, and with Russians deliberately targeting hospitals and schools.
After Ukrainian troops liberated Bucha at the end of March 2022, Ukrainian authorities immediately began investigations into war crimes. They have now identified more than 450 violent deaths, and despite the ongoing war, the search for the perpetrators is underway.
We use facial recognition software. That's how we can establish the identities of the individuals involved in the crimes. In some cases, we've been in direct contact with them. Some confirmed that they were behind the murders and were even proud that they'd killed peaceful civilians. Others denied the acts, but we've identified many of them.
Even though convictions are currently only possible in absentia, photographer Vasil is proud that his pictures have been helpful to the investigations and made it into international media. His street now appears peaceful, but the war remains a daily reality for him.
What happened here is like a scar that stays with you for life. But what depresses me more, not just me, but also my wife and everyone else here, is that there's no hope for the future. Everything is shrouded in fog.
Vasil has mixed feelings about politicians coming to his hometown to celebrate the anniversary of the liberation. He has long grown accustomed to the almost daily air raids, he says, but not to the increasing sense of hopelessness after 4 years of war.
And with that, now you're up to date here on DW News. Don't forget, you can always follow us on social media at DW News. I'm Sarah Kelly. Thank you so much for watching.
Hi, I'm Patricia Carvelis. In our fast-moving world, weekdays I'll unpack the latest in politics.
What is he going to offer that my community is asking for?
Our shifting national affairs.
Young people in this country are angry about housing.
And the global events shaping our lives.
We're seeing a rise in white supremacy.
Tough questions. Are we set for a year of pain, Minister? The big issues.
It's not just our communities that are struggling here.
Afternoon briefing, weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on ABC News Channel.
Good evening, it's Monday the 30th of March. Our top stories. Crude oil prices keep climbing and Asian markets plunge as the conflict in the Middle East escalates. Police shoot dead fugitive Desi Freeman 7 months after he killed 2 police officers. Protesters and police clash in Kathmandu following the arrest of Nepal's former leader. And ready to go, NASA prepares for its first mission to the moon in more than 50 years. You're watching The World. Hello, I'm Girish Saulani. Good to have your company. Also tonight, can Pakistan successfully mediate talks between the US
no military target here.
Parts of this university also reduced to rubble. Iran striking back. In southern Israel, toxic smoke billows from a chemical plant. As missiles fly, a plea for peace. Pakistan says it's ready to host negotiations between the United States and Iran, but US President Donald Trump says talks are already progressing.
We're doing extremely well in that negotiation, but you never know with Iran because we negotiate with them and then we always have to blow them up.
The US is amassing troops in the Middle East, signalling a possible ground operation. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf says Tehran is waiting and threatened to set them on fire and punish US allies once and for all.
And Israel's ground invasion into southern Lebanon is expanding. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu giving the order for his troops to push even further into territory that's historically been a stronghold of the Iranian-backed terror group Hezbollah.
I've now instructed to further expand the existing security strip in order to finally thwart the threat of invasion.
But as Israel fires at what it says are legitimate military targets, civilians are also being killed. Lebanese officials say more than 1,200 people have died since the start of the war. Among them, 3 journalists killed by an Israeli airstrike, one the IDF accuses of being a Hezbollah operative without providing evidence. Alison Horn, ABC News, Jerusalem.
More than 7 months after one of the darkest chapters for Victoria Police, fugitive gunman Desi Freeman is dead. He was shot and killed this morning by police officers after a 3-hour standoff at a remote property on the Victoria-New South Wales border. The self-proclaimed sovereign citizen had been holed up in a shipping container at the property in Tologalong, west of Walwa and 150 kilometres north of Porepunkah, where he fatally shot 2 police officers last August before escaping into bushland. Police are now investigating how he evaded capture for so long and who might have helped him.
A remote property near Victoria's northern border, where Australia's most wanted fugitive was finally found.
Our people are very happy that there is closure to this.
A massive police operation surrounded this converted shipping container. After a standoff, Desi Freeman is believed to have emerged wrapped in bedding, carrying a gun, and was shot dead.
The deceased was given every opportunity to resolve this peacefully and did not take that option.
Neil Sutherland's brother owns the property. He lives nearby. He was woken by a police helicopter around 5 a.m.
I heard the siren and a loudspeaker, and then I don't know how long it was later when I heard a shot.
Freeman's death ends the largest police manhunt in the state's history. It began after he shot 3 officers at his Porpunka home in August last year. They were there to deliver a warrant over historical sex offences. Senior Constable Vadim Devat Hotta and Detective Leading Constable Neil Thompson died at the scene. Freeman fled on foot and, despite a massive manhunt, until today had never been spotted.
That's probably as good a day as I've had for a long time. So, and not, I don't mean that in a bad way, but just it's the finalisation of it.
Desi Freeman was a so-called sovereign citizen with a deep-seated hatred of the courts and police.
Because they are filthy, corrupt, disgusting, lawless predators.
Just last month, police believed Freeman was probably dead, but also said they would not rest until he was brought to justice. Investigators will stay here in the region for the next few days, trying to work out how Desi Freeman evaded capture for 216 days, how he moved undetected through more than 100 kilometres of Victoria's high country, and who, if anyone, helped him do it.
Very important for us to understand how long he's been here and who else was complicit in getting him here.
Late this afternoon, the coroner arrived at the property to collect Freeman's body and begin the investigation into how he met his end. Ben Knight, ABC News, Tholagolong.
US President Donald Trump says he has no problem with Russia sending fuel to Cuba as a Russian oil tanker prepares to dock at the Caribbean island. The US president has effectively cut Cuba off from key oil shipments in an effort to force regime change. It's had devastating effects on civilians, causing island-wide blackouts. Mr. Trump says the delivery of would be a disadvantage to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Doesn't help him. If he loses one boatload of oil, that's all it is. It's fine. If he wants to do that, and if other countries want to do it, it doesn't bother me much. It's not going to have an impact. Cuba's finished. They have a bad regime. They have very bad and corrupt leadership. And whether or not they get a boat of oil, it's not going to matter.
Australian Federal Police have charged 6 crew members from a ship it suspects was used to import 1 ton of cocaine into Australia. The MV Raider was searched in Sydney Harbour earlier this month after it made distress calls off the New South Wales coast. Police found hidden compartments as well as devices and documents allegedly used to help distribute the cocaine within Australian waters. The ship, which is believed to have originated in Central America, was intercepted earlier this year by French authorities in international waters, where nearly 5 tons of cocaine were seized and dumped into the sea. Well, the foreign ministers of Turkey, Saudi Arabia and Egypt have departed Pakistan after holding talks in Islamabad that are aimed at bringing Iran and the US to the negotiating table. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar says Islamabad will host what he calls meaningful talks between the US and Iran in the coming days, but did not specify whether they will be direct or indirect. Pakistan has emerged as a mediator due to its solid ties with both Washington and Tehran. So will these meaningful talks transpire? Professor Samina Yasmin is the director of the Center for Muslim States and Societies at the University of WA, and she joins me now. Yasmin, Dr. Samina Yasmin, good to have you back on the program. Firstly, how was Pakistan able to position itself as a mediator? Has Islamabad gained the trust of the US president?
I think the history is a lot longer than just the US president, but the reality is that historically Pakistan's relations with Iran, with which it shares 909 kilometers, was a mixture of being friendly and unfriendly, and sometimes there were even tensions. And also the same with the United States, because sometimes they were friends, sometimes they weren't. But in the more recent incarnation of the relationship, President Trump took a liking to Pakistan's Field Marshal, head of the military armed forces, and they established a very good relationship. Thanks to that, then the civilian government, which is supported by the military, also developed a good relationship with President Trump's administration. But that's not the only story, because Pakistan government historically has had a very close relationship with the Gulf states, and especially with Saudi Arabia. They signed an agreement after Field Marshal Asim Munir went to the US, and then later on that agreement was signed. So there's a whole network of relationships that Pakistan has established. But given the fact that whatever happens in Iran would impact on Pakistan, and also the fact that there's a very strong connection between the Shia population in Pakistan and Iran, I think the Iranian government realizes that Pakistan is in a better position to communicate what they feel is right or not right vis-a-vis American suggestions of how the tension could be brought down. So it's because of that reason, President Trump thinking that Pakistan establishment can help with the negotiations, and Iran realizing that Pakistan's own national interests make it important for Pakistan to play a role in this whole process.